The sun over the city dragged itself across a sky choked with smog, casting long, tired shadows between rusted fences and broken sidewalks. Near a forgotten public park, wedged between two concrete housing blocks and a shuttered toy store, a dog lay silent. He did not whine. He did not bark. His body, curled near a dried-out fountain, trembled with the kind of stillness that only comes after all hope has bled out. It was a German shepherd. Or at least, it had once been. Now his fur was coated in blotches of purple and orange paint, cheap, synthetic, sprayed across his body in chaotic streaks. One ear drooped unnaturally. Dried blood crusted around the edges of his eyes. His rib cage, visible beneath the patchy fur, rose and fell like the shuddering wing of a bird too broken to fly. Children had thrown stones at him the day before. A teenager had taken a video. Adults passed him by, tightening their coats or steering, their children away. Some murmured. Some didn't even glance down. He didn't flinch anymore, but someone noticed him that morning. A pair of small feet wandered into the park, bare, dusty, and soft. They belonged to a toddler, no more than 2 years old. His name was Ayan. His mother was nearby, sitting on a cement bench with a half-empty milk bottle and tired eyes, chatting with another woman. She didn't notice Ayan had wandered off. Not yet. The boy approached the painted dog slowly, the way a child approaches a butterfly or a balloon. No fear, just curiosity. The dog lifted his head half an inch. One dull eye blinked, then closed again. Ayan stopped, tilted his head. His tiny hand reached forward, not to touch, but to offer. A biscuit. Cracked and half-chewed. He placed it in front of the dog's nose and stepped back, watching. The German shepherd didn't move. His body was too spent, too cold, but his nostrils twitched. A faint sound, almost a sigh, escaped his throat. Ayan sat down next to him. He didn't scream, he didn't pet, he just sat, his back against the cracked fountain wall, legs stretched out, biscuit crumbs in his lap. The dog shifted, barely, and for the first time in 2 days, he licked something, just once. The biscuit. Across the park, someone yelled, a woman's voice. Ayan! But Ayan didn't move. His eyes were locked on the dog. His mother spotted him and rushed over, gasped when she saw what he was sitting next to. She reached for his arm, but stopped. Something in her son's face, something too calm, too serious for his age. Ayan, John, come here, that dog is sick, she whispered. He looked up at her, then back at the dog. Then, to everyone's surprise, he laid his head gently on the dog's side. The crowd that had begun to gather around the edge of the park watched in silence. Some lifted phones. Others lowered their eyes. No one expected what happened next. The dog, this painted, broken creature, let out a sound. Not a growl, not a cry, a whine. Soft, like wind slipping under a closed door. And then his head turned. His nose brushed the boy's shoulder. Yen's mother gasped, hand over her mouth. But neither boy nor dog moved again. They simply breathed. And in that cracked old park, surrounded by the noise of traffic and a city too numb to notice, something impossible began. A bond not forged by language, not made of logic, but of recognition and memory, of what it means to be seen, to be safe, to be worthy. The crowd around them began to grow, and with it came murmurs. A few mothers tugged their children away. Some stared with puzzled expressions. Others looked down at their phones. The painted dog and the boy were now a strange tableau at the center of attention. A man in a delivery uniform approached cautiously, holding a half-eaten sandwich. That's the same dog from the videos, isn't it? He muttered. The one them kids painted like a circus clown? Yeah, someone else whispered. He's still here? He should be put down, said another man, shaking his head. The dog flinched at that voice. But Ayan, still seated beside the shepherd, reached forward and did something no one expected. He placed his small palm gently on the dog's painted forehead. No pressure, just presence. The dog's breath hitched, and then slowed. The child's mother knelt now, her hand gently stroking her son's hair. She dared not move him. Something unspoken warned her not to. The sun dipped behind a tower block, casting a soft gold hue across the two figures. The dog blinked just once. His breathing, though shallow, had a rhythm now, and Ayan leaned back into his side, calm as ever. The park, the city, the world, it all hushed. If only for a few seconds, and for a moment that would later be described in stories and replays and quiet dinner tables. Nothing moved. Just a painted dog, and a baby who saw something worth saving. The morning after the park incident, Ayan's mother sat at the kitchen table, her eyes fixed on the steam rising from her untouched tea. Across from her, her husband scrolled silently through his phone, stopping when he reached a video. It was them. Ayan, the painted German shepherd, the moment frozen in digital pixels now replayed by strangers. Millions of them. "This is going viral," he muttered. "News channels, animal groups, everyone's talking about it." But Ayan's mother only shook her head, her voice low. They didn't hear it. That sound the dog made. That cry. She hadn't been able to shake it. Not the video, not the image, but the sound. The park was different now. A fence had been erected hastily around the fountain. A local vet clinic taped a flyer to a pole. Wounded shepherd under care. Donations welcome. But what no one saw, what the camera couldn't capture, was what happened just before the authorities arrived. When the animal rescue van pulled into the lot, the crowd had parted like reeds in a river. A man in a beige uniform stepped out, tired, cautious, his gloves tugged on, his tone flat. "Everyone please step back." Two volunteers followed, holding leashes and a blanket. The dog's body, barely moving, twitched at the sound of heavy boots on gravel. But as they approached, the German shepherd lifted his head, not to growl, not to escape, to look at Ayan. A lingering glance, like a soldier looking one last time, at his post, and then he did something extraordinary. He stood, bones popping, legs wobbling. The shepherd staggered to his feet. His entire frame shook with effort. But he stood, tall, proud, as though he wanted the crowd to see that he was not a thing to be carted off, not a stray, not a clown. He was a dog, with memory, with pride. The vet's voice caught in his throat. The volunteers slowed. "Let him come," someone whispered. Ayan's mother reached for her son, unsure. But the dog, painted and bleeding, walked, 3 trembling steps, 4, until he stood in front of the child once more. He lowered his head, not in submission, but in offering. Ayan, without hesitation, placed his hand on the dog's muzzle, and in that moment, the park transformed. Silence spread like sunlight over water. No one spoke. Even the wind held its breath. It was not a goodbye, it was a passing. Of something invisible, sacred, old. A bond formed not from words or knowledge, but instinct, recognition. A vet finally stepped forward. "We need to take him in," he said gently, and this time the shepherd allowed it. He walked with them, slowly, dignified. He didn't resist the leash, didn't flinch at the lifting of the blanket. His eyes flicked back once, to Ayan. Then he was gone. The news cycle ran wild. "Painted dog rescued by baby," screamed headlines. Animal welfare groups called it a miracle. Experts debated whether the child's presence had calmed the dog or triggered some buried memory. But those who had been there, they knew. They knew what it felt like when that cry had echoed across the concrete. When a toddler had sat beside something the world had discarded and called it sacred, not in words, but in silence. Something had passed between species. A recognition beyond survival. A cry that had been ignored for days. Finally answered. And for once, the city listened. Later that week, as the sun began to dip behind rows of low rooftops, Ayan's Mother took him to the vet's clinic. She didn't know why. She only knew she needed to go. Inside, it smelled like antiseptic and damp fur. The painted dog, now mostly cleaned, lay on a soft blanket. Bandages wrapped his ribs and legs. His fur had been clipped where wounds had festered. The paint still clung faintly to his tail, as if reluctant to let go of the ugliness. He was awake. He saw Ayan. His tail moved once. The vet entered from the back. "He's recovering," he said. "But slow. Trauma like that. It's not just physical." Ayan toddled forward and sat, cross-legged, beside the dog again. No cameras, no crowd, just a quiet room filled with the hum of a small fan and the scent of healing. This time the shepherd placed his paw over the boy's tiny shoe. A small movement, a gesture, and that was enough. It began with a sound, not loud, not sudden. A slow breath against the stillness of midnight. Ayan stirred in his bed. His mother in the next room had drifted into an uneasy sleep. But Rahi had not moved from his position by the door. He rose now, ears alert, eyes calm, but fixed on something beyond the visible. The room shimmered with moonlight. Pale and silver, it made the cheap wooden floor glow like a riverbed under a clouded sky. Rahi patted gently to Ayan's door and nudged it open. No bark, no whine, just breath. Inside, Ayan sat upright, already waiting, not startled, as if he, too, had heard the call, soundless, primal, full of ancient weight. He rose from his bed, slipped his hand into the fur at Rayahi's neck, and together, they moved. The night air was crisp, almost damp. Ayan's mother would later say she dreamed of rivers that night, of glassy waters and dogs made of starlight, of her son walking, barefoot toward a place she couldn't follow. They walked, Ayan and Rahi, through streets emptied by sleep. The city breathed differently at night. Traffic lights blinked on deserted crossroads like eyelids dreaming. Somewhere, a train passed. Somewhere, a fox paused in an alley, but the two kept walking. Drawn by something older than maps, they reached the park. The same one, the place of their first meeting. And Rahi stopped. Sat. Faced the old stone bench where he had once collapsed. Trembling and stained, Ayan didn't speak, but his breath matched Rahi's. In, out, in, out. Then, as if guided by muscle memory, Rahi stood. Walked forward, toward the center of the clearing, and from the shadows a rustle, then another, silent footsteps, glints of eyes. Dogs. 4, maybe 5. Not strays, not pets, somewhere in between. The urban wild. Rahi didn't growl, nor did they. They circled, slowly, not threatening, as if observing ceremony. Rahi sat. The oldest of the dogs, a brindled mutt with clouded eyes, approached, touched noses, then bowed, and the others did too, one by one. And in the center of it all stood Ayan, watching, silent. A breeze swept through the grass, and in it a language not of words, a vow. This child, this dog. Something had passed between them, and the pack knew. Rahi turned, brushed his head against Ayan's knee, and Ayan, barely 3 feet tall, bent forward. He whispered. Just one word, his first in hours. Safe. They walked back before dawn. No one saw them, no camera, no witness, except the fox, and the wind, and whatever gods still listened to children and dogs. Rahi curled up again by the door. Ayan slept with one arm on his plush police dog. His mother, waking near sunrise, stepped into the room and froze. Rahi looked up at her, eyes soft, and Ayan, still asleep, was smiling. It was not the end of something. It was the beginning, the breath before the word, the breath between worlds. Dawn broke like spilled milk over the rooftops. slow and silent. The clouds peeled apart, just enough to let a stream of gold pour through, casting everything in a tentative hope. Rahi was already awake. His ears twitched before his eyes opened. Something in the stillness of the apartment told him the day wouldn't be ordinary. Ayan stirred moments later. No cries, no confusion, just the child rising to his feet like a tide returning to the shore. The connection was unspoken, but undeniable. They were no longer boy and dog. They were something else, witnesses of a vow the world had forgotten how to keep. In the kitchen, Ayan's mother stared at her son. "You're different," she murmured. He blinked, as if unsure whether she meant him or Rahi. Later that day, Rahi refused his leash. At first, Ayan's mother insisted, but the dog's stance was calm, unmoving. He was not challenging her. He was declaring something. He would walk beside the boy, not behind him. So they went, to the very edge of the neighborhood where city faded into scrub, and the early fingers of forest reached like veins through cracked concrete. There, the feral dogs returned, not as shadows but openly now, not snarling but purposeful. Rahi stepped forward, his head lowered, not submission, but reverence. And the brindled elder stepped forth, carrying something in his jaws. A length of faded cloth, paint-stained, familiar. Ayan gasped. It was the cloth Rahi had been wrapped in the day they found him. The paint still clung to it like bruises on memory. The old dog dropped it at Ayan's feet. Rahi nudged it gently toward the boy, then stepped back. Ayan didn't know why his hands trembled as he touched it. But the moment he did, a breeze surged, strong and circular like breath exhaled from the earth itself. One by one, the dogs lowered themselves, not to Rahi, to Ayan. Something in that moment changed. Maybe it was how the birds paused mid-song, or how the leaves seemed to lean inward. Maybe it was how the elder dog touched his paw to the dirt, then to his own heart. Or maybe it was how Rahi, for the first time since being rescued, let out a sound not of fear or pain, but of something almost melodic. A warble deep in the throat, half howl, half hymn. Ayan sat, cross-legged, cloth in his lap. The dogs came forward slowly and pressed their heads to his knees, one by one, a gesture not seen in science, not taught in obedience schools, a ritual, beyond rules, beyond law. When it ended, the dogs scattered, no signal, no command, just wind and instinct. Rahi remained. Ayan rose and handed the cloth to his mother. "We should bury it," he said. The words stunned her, not because they were said, but because of how they were said. Calm, measured, like he was carrying the voice of something much older. They buried the cloth beneath the old oak tree near the clearing. Rahi watched, then pawed the dirt once, twice. Done. They walked home in silence, but the world no longer looked the same. Not to the mother, not to the boy, and certainly not to the dog who had once been left behind. They had witnessed something, a gesture beyond law, and nothing, not even time, could take it back. The next morning brought fog, not the kind that blurs sight, but the kind that hangs, low like breath over still water, waiting. Ayan felt it before he saw it. The air was thick, watching, expecting. Rahi stood at the door before anyone else stirred. No leash, no sound, just presence. When Ayan opened the door, the dog moved like he already knew where to go. The walk was slow, ceremonial. Through the back alleys dusted with dew, past sleeping houses, toward the forest's edge. Ayan's mother followed at a distance, uncertain if she was meant to witness what came next, or if she already had seen too much. The forest was not empty. Dogs emerged, like ghosts from behind trees and broken fences, some limping, some scarred, some so old their muzzles were frosted white, but all silent, all gathered. Rahi did not lead. He followed. The brindled elder stepped forward, gave a soft grunt, and began the descent down a trail invisible to anyone but them. Ayan followed without hesitation, Rahi beside him, the others forming a loose procession around them. It was not a path worn by man. Roots clawed through the soil. Leaves whispered in foreign tongues. And yet, Ayan didn't stumble. It felt like the earth made space for him. They came to a clearing shaped like a bowl. At its center lay a pond, motionless as glass. But this was no ordinary waterhole. Around it were relics, half-buried toys, collars, tags, even a child's shoe. Offerings. Remains, echoes? Rahi stopped at the edge. The brindled elder turned to Ayan, and for the first time moved close enough to touch. His breath was warm, his eyes old and knowing. He bent his head and pressed his nose to Ayan's forehead. Not a sniff. A blessing. Then, the others did the same, one by one, silent, devout. Rahi went last. But he did not touch the boy. He turned instead to the water, stepped in until it reached his chest and stood there, waiting. Ayan's heart thumped. The dogs began to howl, not mournful, not wild, a resonance, a chorus that climbed and folded into the fog above. Rahi's head tilted skyward. The howl left him too, and Ayan cried, not from sadness, from knowing, from release. When the howling ceased, Rahi returned, but he was not the same. His body bore the same marks, but his eyes shimmered, differently, like something had settled inside him, a calm older than language. The elder dog turned away and began the slow climb back up the trail. Rahi followed. So did Ayan. The others faded behind, merging once more with shadows and bark. As they emerged into sunlight, the fog peeled back, and for the first time in weeks, the sky was clear. Ayan's mother, standing where the forest began, gasped when she saw them return, not because of the dogs, but because of Ayan. He walked taller, eyes wide, but no longer afraid, and beside him, Rahi moved not as a pet, but as a sentinel, not a rescued dog, but a guardian returned, and behind them, silence. But a silence that felt full, final, sacred. They had gone where no human was meant to go, and been allowed to return. Escorted, endorsed, changed. For 3 nights, Ayan barely spoke. Rahi never left his side. The village had begun to speak, though. Whispers passed from mother to baker to field hand. They spoke of the painted dog, of the forest dogs, of the boy, who entered alone and returned different. And so, on the 4th day, when Ayan stood in the center of the village square, barefoot and calm, people listened. They were drawn not by drama, but gravity. He held nothing in his hands, no script, no evidence, only a quiet ache behind his eyes. I broke the rule, he said, the one that says, don't interfere. He paused. A breeze stirred dust around his ankles. I found a creature that had been made a joke, stripped of dignity, painted like a toy, left in a place where children laughed and pointed, some kicked. Gasps. Rahi sat beside him, spine straight, watching the crowd, not Ayan. I thought I was saving a dog, but he saved me. He looked to the sky, blinking back the salt. I was angry. At life. At how much ugliness can hide behind smiles. At how no one does anything, even when they see cruelty right in front of them. But this dog, he didn't carry hate. He carried memory. Heads tilted. Confusion flickered, but none spoke. He didn't growl when I touched the paint. He didn't bite when I tried to clean him. He just waited, like he knew something I didn't. Now his voice trembled, but he didn't stop. There is a place in the woods, a place people pretend doesn't exist. It's not on any map. Not even the hunters speak of it. But the dogs do. He knelt then, beside Rahi. They remember every collar tossed into a ditch, every pup abandoned on the highway, every lash, every scream, every human who turned away. Silence. And they forgive. Not forget. Not erase. But forgive. Because something inside them still sees hope in us. He placed his hand on Ra'ahi's back. I saw that hope. Felt it. And I can't unsee it now. A woman in the crowd cried, softly. A man lowered his eyes. Ayan stood again. I came back to tell you this. They watch. They remember. And sometimes, only sometimes, they guide. If you let them. Ra'ahi rose with him. As they turned to walk away, no one stopped them. No one laughed, because something sacred had just been shared, and no one wanted to be the one to break it. 2 weeks passed, and then came the visitors. They weren't villagers or curious travelers. These were people with clipboards, long-lens cameras, and university tags sewn into their jackets. Scientists, conservationists, biologists who had heard a story from a neighboring district, then another from a child, then finally, Ayan's own mother, who had quietly written a letter she never intended to send. But she had, and they came, not to debunk, but to understand. They interviewed Ayan gently, took soil samples from the clearing, set up motion sensor cameras just beyond the trail's mouth. Some stayed behind to observe the area. Others followed the story through veterinary clinics and shelters, tracing where Ra'ahi may have come from. They returned with nothing definite. No record of the dog, no chip, no former owner. But the cameras? They captured something no one expected. At dawn, at twilight, and in the quietest hours before the world stirs, dogs pass through the clearing. Always alone. Always pausing. Sometimes sitting by the pond. Sometimes leaving objects. A piece of cloth, a dead flower, a torn child's glove. An ethologist whispered, "This isn't territory behavior." Another said, "It's closer to ritual." A third, silent for most of the trip, finally murmured, "We've seen elephants grieve. Chimps hold wakes. But this is something else." When they asked Ayan if he had returned to the clearing, he shook his head. "They brought me there. It wasn't mine to revisit." Rahi was beside him, calm as always. Not a subject, not a specimen, just a quiet witness. One of the researchers, a woman with sharp eyes softened by kindness, reached down and offered her hand to Rahi. He sniffed it, then, gently, placed his paw in hers, and the woman gasped, not at the gesture, but at what was beneath it. Scar tissue, layers of it. The kind that doesn't come from one act of cruelty, but many. Still, his eyes held no fear, only memory and trust. The report never made it to television, but it did make its way through academic circles, quietly, reverently. Some mocked it, others dismissed it as myth, but a few, just a few, kept the footage locked away, returned to it often. Not for study, for grounding, as if it reminded them what science was supposed to serve. Wonder. The mountain remained silent. Its flanks, carved by wind and time, bore no scars from the stories told. At its base, but somewhere among its roots, a clearing remained, a place where twilight always came with soft wind, and the breath of trees slowed like a sigh. Ayan returned, not to prove anything, not to recapture something lost, but because the silence had begun to speak to him, not in words, in feeling. Rahi walked beside him, older now, slower, but his eyes had only deepened, not dulled. They walked without urgency, without fear, as though they were returning not to a place but to a rhythm. At the edge of the clearing, Ayan paused. Ra'ahi stepped forward. The grass had grown taller, golden and thick with memory. The pond was smaller now, narrowed by seasons, but clear. Still, like a mirror. No animals came that day. None needed to. Ayan sat where he had once knelt. He pulled a small pouch from his jacket. From it, he took out the collar, the one Rahi had worn when they found each other. Still stained faintly with the paint, no soap could completely erase. He placed it at the edge of the pond, not as an offering, as a marker of trust, of passage, of debt repaid. Rahi did not look at it. He simply lay down beside it, resting his chin on his paws. A bird called in the distance. Leaves whispered a language only trees understand, and the mountain listened. Back in the village, Ayan never told the full story again. He didn't need. The children grew up knowing Rahi not as a pet, but as something between guardian and ghost. Farmers left scraps at the forest's edge, not out of superstition, but respect. The story became a hush passed between generations, not a tale of magic. Tale of memory, of what happens when one soul reaches for another and is met halfway. Long after Rahi passed and long after Ayan's hair turned silver, there were still sightings, not frequent, never predictable. A single dog, scarred and dignified, watching from the edge of the wood, silent, then gone, and every time, the air afterward felt different, lighter, like the world had just been reminded that even among the ruins we leave behind, some things still choose to forgive us and never forget.